I not only really believe that you can make a difference and change your world, I really believe you better make a difference. If people learn good values and they live those good values, and if they value others and work together to develop a value-based community, they can change their world.
Hi, I'm Chris Godey. I don't know about you, but I know that I love to absorb content. There's so much free content out there. However, one challenge that I do have is that I often struggle to then take that content and put it into practice. I don't change the habits that I need to based off of the video that I've been inspired by. If that's you, I want you to watch this video, and then I would love for you to comment, and we would love to hear your thoughts below.
Oh, he said practice, the practice sessions. I said, okay, pull that out for me. Oh, he said, John, he said, in the practice sessions, we could do the basic things and practice the basic things that would help us win when we played the game. And he told me something very interesting. He said, so I was challenged with the practice session because I knew if we practice well, as you practice is how you play. He said by the time the game came, and if you got to be old, but if you're old like I am, John Wooden, who was this incredible coach, would literally sit on the bench, and he would cross his leg, and he'd hold a program in his hand, and he basically watched his team play like this. I mean, almost like a
spectator.
A spectator that really came to the game, but they really don't care what happens. It's just like, I'll watch the game. And he told me, he said, the game was already a foregone conclusion. And so it was from him. Now let's go, because this is, I think, huge for your podcast players. He taught me that work has to be stored up before it shows up.
Oh, wow.
And if you don't store it up, when it comes time to show, you have no show and tell at all. And so he taught me, he said, and that's where the compounding comes. In the beginning of whatever we do in life, we're doing a lot of good things, but it doesn't show up. And you just say, wow, I don't know, should I keep doing this? And sometimes because it doesn't show up, we quit. But he said, no, you just stay with it, and it's stored up. And then one day, it starts showing up. And then it begins to show up, and people say, wow, how did they know this? And look what they're doing. It was my father who said, he had another way of saying it, and he taught me when I was 17. I said I was going to go in the ministry, and he said, well, then, John, you never have an empty well. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, you got to fill the well. You got to be able to go over and he said, you got to have a full well so you can take your bucket when you need it and go and get that water. Well, you do an awful lot of storing up before you get the privilege of even putting the bucket in the water to take it to show up. And I think the miss is that for so many of us, if it doesn't show up, we get discouraged and we say, well, and what's sad is about the time the compounding is about to give you the return, about the time the well is full enough for you to begin to pull water out of it, is sometimes we quit right before we were about to have the abundant harvest. And you know, like I say, when you can afford to quit, you can't afford to quit.
Yeah, that was Jamie's story today. It was amazing.
Oh, wasn't that great?
Yeah, I don't know if our listeners know who she is, but Jamie Kern-Lima, who created this cosmetic brand, had hundreds and hundreds of no's as she was trying to create this business out of her home. So many times she could have just given up on her dream and quit, and of course, ultimately ends up selling her business to L'Oreal for $1.2 billion.
Yeah, it works out.
That's a B.
With a B.
That's a B. In case you thought you didn't hear right.
And then became the first female CEO of L'Oreal, but how inspiring it was, to hang in there.
How do I do that? How do you do that? How do we take something bad and make it better? We have to be intentional. What I'm going to give you can't be accidental. It has to be intentional. I have to be intentional in 6 things right now. I have to be intentional, first of all, in my personal time. I have a more personal time than I've ever had before because I've had a whole bunch of stuff canceled in my life. So what am I going to do in the time that I have? And I hope the answer is not watch TV. I don't mean this unkindly. TV's fine. But I hope we're going to upgrade ourselves just a little bit. For example, for me, on my desk, if you went into my home right now, on my desk on the left side, right here on my desk are 6 books. 6 books that I have purposely, intentionally picked out and said, okay, in this downtime, I'm going to read these books. Now, I haven't been able to get to them until now, but I can, and so I'm going to read those books. I'm also going to make it a time of exercise. I'm going to make it a time of trying to get a little bit better and healthy and eat a little bit better in that whole process. Okay, well, that's personal. But what the question is what are you going to do with your personal time? You've got to be intentional. I challenge you to be intentional in your personal time to do something that'll make you better. Number 2, your family time. What are you going to do in your family time? I mean, you're having more family time than ever before. Margaret and I have kind of developed a list of movies that we kind of want to see at home, perhaps together, and you know, we're going to take more walks than we've taken before. In other words, what are you going to do with your family that's just going to be positive? Maybe with your family you would want to sit down and share what I'm teaching. Wow, wouldn't that be good? Sit and gather them around and say, look, this is how we need to be thinking. Here's how we need to be acting during a crisis time. Okay, how about catch-up time? How about your catch-up time? That's the third area. And I'm not talking about ketchup that you put on with fries. I'm talking about CATH. You know, I can catch up on some things that I would have never gotten to, and you know, things like mundane things like commitment I've made is to clean my closet out. That closet's need to be cleaned out for 3 years. Every time I go into it, it just looks at me and says, "Clean me out, clean me out." And I've ignored it. But I got a little time. I'm going to do that. But I'm going to have some time now to really give to a new book that I'm writing that I'm very excited that's going to come out soon. And so now I can really focus on that book. Okay, how about, here's a good one for you. Number 4, be intentional in your adding value time. Okay. In a crisis, people need encouragement and added value more than any other time. So why don't you every day write down one name of a person that you need to encourage, a call that you need to make, just a touch that say, I'm going to add value to these people today. Get intentional. You'll be surprised not only how it'll help the people, but how it'll help you. Number 5, I'm a person of faith. You don't have to listen to this, but I have what I call my faith time. What am I going to do as a person of faith? Well, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to develop my trust muscle. I'm going to really work on that. And a trust muscle basically means I'm going to have to trust God to give me strength and peace when I don't have all the answers.
I think that's so important, and I just kind of even want to highlight that for someone who's listening right now.
Yes.
That success isn't when you get the promotion or the book deal or launch your company or get acknowledged or get published or whatever. Success is when you're faithful today in doing the small things. And along your line of saying overestimating, underestimating, I had a mentor years ago, John, tell me that something very similar. But he said that you'll typically overestimate what you can do in the short run.
Yes.
And then he said, but you'll vastly underestimate what you can do through a lifetime of faithfulness. Question. And that's what you're talking about. I like the idea of consistency compounds. It's so
totally
true.
I was doing a leadership conference one time, and we were having a great day. There were a couple thousand people there. And I was in my last break, and I was signing some books, and a kid who was just getting his MBA came up to me. He was so excited. He said, "Oh man, I love this." He said, "I've decided I want to do what you do." And I said, "Well, that's great." I said, I have a question for you. He said, "What's that?" He's so eager. I said, "Would you like to do what I did?"
Right.
So you can do what I do. Uh-huh. See, the issue is not I want to do what you do. Everybody wants to do what somebody that's doing something really amazing does. I tell them, forget I want to do what you do and go to, well, am I willing to did what you did? You got to get in the did world before you can get into the do world. Yep. And so we had a nice conversation, but I think so many times we see the success of somebody and we kind of gravitate like, oh, I want to do that, not realizing there was a whole process of daily disciplines that got them there, and without those, they would have never had that day.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine somebody listening now, just they're in the didding part.
Yeah,
you got to did so you can do.
Yeah, and I tell them if they don't do the did, they're in deep doo-doo.
Let me ask you one more quote, and then I want to hear about your new book, and then we'll do a little lightning round of fun questions. But you talk a lot about attitude, and one of your well-known quotes is, "People may hear your words, but they feel your attitude." And I'm curious, John, how important is attitude in leadership? Like for real, does it matter? How much does it matter?
I think it's the difference maker. Now, I've heard people say attitude is everything, and that's not true. I mean, I always want to say no. If attitude is everything, what do you do with incompetence? I mean, the good news is they have a great attitude. The bad news is they're incompetent. Well, one day you got to deal with the incompetence. So attitude isn't everything, but I do think it's the main thing. And what I mean by that, I think it's a difference maker. If you have two people with equal skill set, equal experience, equal contribution, and all that, but one has a good attitude and one has a bad attitude, who are you going to have on your team?
Right.
And why? For only one reason. Attitude showed up in one person's life instead of another person's life. My father passed away on July 4th of 2020, 98 years old. Incredible influence upon my life, Craig. And 2 days before he died, I sat by his bedside for 3 hours. And I sat down with him and I shared with him every lesson that he taught me. And as I would share with him every lesson he taught me, I would say to him, I learned the lesson from your words first, but I remember the lesson because of your actions. Wow. You backed it up with your life. Mm-hmm. And I think that everything that we say is backed up by our spirit, by our attitude. It's kind of like what you said was true, but your attitude made it palatable. Mm-hmm. It made it something that gave me a hunger to have. And I think that attitude is and it's a choice. One other thing, attitude's a choice. Something so important we get to choose. A lot of things I'm unable to do because I don't have skill sets, but everybody can pass the attitude test if they want.
Did you grow up? I'm just curious. We're going to navigate in and out of different topics. Did you grow up in your faith? Was that something you were raised with in your household?
Yeah. My father was a pastor.
Your dad was a pastor
so,
too.
Yeah,
Okay.
I grew up in a beautiful home. In fact, my father's still alive. Okay. He'll be in fact a couple of days he'll be 97.
That's incredible.
And
that bodes well for you, by the way.
Yeah, it really does. It bodes really well for me. But I was very fortunate. When it comes to parents, I won the lottery. I just, many people, we don't choose our parents.
Right.
But my parents, my mother unconditionally loved me, and my father had this, and still has this incredible drive and entrepreneurship and this kind of largeness about him that constantly expands his world. So as his world was expanding, we were growing up in it, and my world expanded. Yeah. And so I grew up in a leadership culture.
Sure.
I didn't even know what it was as a kid, but
it was your environment.
Yeah, it was just it's what it is. It's what it is. It's exactly right.
And as we shift a little bit, it is interesting to me because I have people all the time telling me that there's these things that hold them back from chasing that calling that you've described. And I think one of them is, maybe I'm wrong about that, but you grew up in the church, your dad was a pastor, you become one. I'm sure the family was very proud of that, right?
Yeah.
You'd achieved so much.
Yeah.
I imagine that adds to the difficulty that your family was so proud of something you had already been accomplishing. I find people all the time say that one of the things that holds them back is, well, my family doesn't support what I'm about to go do.
Yeah.
Do you see that too?
All the time, and I'm glad you brought it up. I wrote a book, I don't know, maybe 8-10 years ago called Put Your Dream to the Test.
Okay.
And it's just a good solid book. And in it, the kind of the thesis of that book was that the more valid reasons you have to accomplish a dream, the higher the odds are that you will. Oh, wow. Now that's a powerful thesis. So there's no cotton candy here. There's no hype stuff here.
Yes.
And so I basically looked at what are the valid reasons to achieve a dream, and there were 10 of them.
Okay.
And so I formed it in a way of questions. But the first question is your dream really your dream? And that's where we start at. Because can I tell you something? If your dream isn't really your dream, ain't going to work. And I tell people in the book, hey, the first dream we have isn't our dream. Yes. It's our parents' dream. So my mom and dad, when I was 7, they thought I was going to be a musician. And so I'm taking piano lessons from the 7 years old to about 13. I wasn't any good in piano.
It wasn't your giftedness.
It wasn't my gift, but they're so proud. They go to my recitals and clap. You see, I'm living their dream. I'm playing the piano. I can't play the piano. I'm not very good at it. I'm not gifted, but it doesn't matter. I'm living their dream. Yep. So what I tell people all the time is we start off our life living someone else's dream, probably our parents. So what happens is a lot of people as adults, they never switch.
So true.
And so they're still living someone else's dream. And again, it's like a biblical analogy. It's King, or David before he was king, putting on King Saul's armor.
Yes,
it's not fitting, and he's staggering around there. Well, I know a lot of people, they're putting on someone else's armor, and they just aren't going to achieve because it's not who they are. It's not their dream.
Yeah, that's, by the way, everybody listening, just go back about 1.5 minutes and listen to that again, please, because that is so absolutely golden true. So that was a difficult decision for you, I assume, right?
It was a difficult decision for me because all I ever knew was pastoring. So let's start there.
Yeah.
It wasn't a difficult decision for me as far as knowing where I was going to go.
Yep.
So I think a lot of times we have clarity on where we should go, but there's a lot of emotion that holds us back. I'm just going to intentionally add value to people every day. And
what does that look like every day? I mean, is that, we know what you do publicly, but let's say on the day you're not speaking somewhere, how would you add value to somebody on that day?
Oh, well, first of all, every time I go into my office and start writing, I'm not going to be able to speak to them today, but I'm writing words that they're going to read. So I'm intentionally adding value to, I'm doing something, I'm taking an action, although I'm not interacting individually with like you today, Matt. I'm taking action on something that's going to add value to you tomorrow. So when I talk about intentionally adding value to people, there'll be days when I honestly would hardly see anyone, maybe except Margaret if I'd be at home. But I'm still intentionally adding value to people by either my writing or working on my lessons, or I'm intentionally adding value to people because I have a phone list of people that for example, I have a list of names on my iPhone of people that have expressed that they would like for me to share with them about God.
Right.
And so I take that out. Not every day, but I take it out 3 or 4 times a week and look at one of the names and call them and intentionally. Here, one of the things I love about intentional living is if you're going to live intentionally, you have to think intentionally. And I think this is to me, the real secret of living intentionally is that I begin to think on the front end. See, you can either think on the front end or you can think on the back end, but here's the difference. If thinking on the front end is 10 to 1 more important than on the back end. How many times have we finished something and said, oh man, I wish I would have done that. And why didn't I think of that? Well, you didn't think of it because you didn't think on the front end. And so I think the secret of success of intentional living is that it causes us to do intentional thinking on the front end. I mean, so that when I get into the podcast with you, and we're talking to all of our listeners and all of our people that watch the podcast, all of our friends, we can really help them. We can really help them because, when you said my podcast is a content podcast. That's why I listen to it. I listen to it because of your content. And by the way, Chris, you do take the complicated, make it simple. But you do it one more. There are some people who can take complicated, make it simple, but then you take the simple and make it applicable to a person's life. They not only now to take complicated and go simple means I understand it. To take simple and take it to application means I do it. And so you have 2 steps, I think, and I think that's your secret sauce. If somebody said, what's Chris Hodges do better than anybody I know, I would tell them he takes complicated, makes it simple, then he takes simple and makes it applicable to a person's life. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that you did for me, because you've been mentoring me for almost 20 years now, and
beautiful 20 years.
Well, it has been, and honestly, and I can't say thank you enough and tell you how much I love you.
Yeah, I love you too.
I deeply love you.
Precious friend.
But one of the greatest gifts you gave me is being able to think it on the front end and even write it out. And one of my favorite teachings that you have is that rule of 5.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, my favorite book of yours is Today Matters. I've said that for 20 years. It's just because it helps you make every day a masterpiece. And when my days that were intentional, that weren't really producing much, I can get a little discouraging when you know you're doing the right thing and you're intentional about doing the right thing, but you didn't see a whole lot of fruit from it. But now I'm kind of 40 years into the process now, and you have that compounding effect of doing that rule of 5 every day.
If you have the privilege of leading a team or an organization, and you would love help with enhancing your leadership culture, maybe even developing some of your high potential leaders, just follow the link on the screen, and we would love to connect with you.
So now I can really focus on that book. Okay, how about, here's a good one for you. Number 4, be intentional in your adding value time. Okay, In a crisis, people need encouragement and added value more than any other time. So why don't you every day write down one name of a person that you need to encourage, a call that you need to make, just a touch that say, I'm going to add value to these people today. Get intentional. You'll be surprised not only how it'll help the people, but how it'll help you. Number 5, I'm a person of faith. You don't have to listen to this, but I have what I call my faith time. Well, what am I going to do as a person of faith? Well, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to develop my trust muscle. I'm going to really work on that. And a trust muscle basically means I'm going to have to trust God to give me strength and peace when I don't have all the answers. And by the way, if you're not a person of faith, you go ahead and do that. You'll find out how he'll help you too. He's no respecter of persons. He loves you every bit as much as he loves me. But I'm going to work on my trust muscles. I'm going to work on my gratitude now, because gratitude is most hard to express during difficult times. And I'm going to work on my prayer life. In fact, I spent time in prayer for you today. Okay, just asking God to give you strength during this time. And then, okay. The 6th thing I want you to work on is your thinking time. Your thinking time. And I want you to put yourself through a positive grid. This morning, I wrote 3 questions I want you to consider every day as you think. Question number 1, how will this crisis make me better? It's a great question. Give yourself 10 minutes, 15 minutes every day and say, okay, I'm going to write these questions down. I'm going to think upon this. How will this crisis make me better? There are answers. If you think about it, you'll find them. Number 2, how will I use this crisis to help other people? Wow, that's huge. And by the way, you're going to get an abundance of answers in that, because everybody needs help in a crisis. And number 3, what action will I take? Oh my, this is great. What action will I take that will improve my situation? What action am I going to take that'll just, what can I do that'll just make me better? Okay, here we go. Perspective principles. How we view things is how we do things. I'll give you probably maybe 3 now, and then tomorrow I'm going to give you 8, okay? So I think there are about 11 perspective principles. So don't miss what I'm going to give you tomorrow, but I'm going to give you 3 right now. Number 1, everything worthwhile is uphill. If you've heard me do any teaching at all, because I wrote a book called Intentional Living, you've watched me use the visualization of everything is worthwhile, it's uphill, and I put my arm in the air, and I just basically say, up at the top are my dreams, my hopes, my ambitions, my desires. Everything good, it's up there. It's not down here. I got to climb to get it. Now, when I say everything worthwhile is uphill, let me tell you the difference between in average times and in crisis times. In average times, everything worthwhile is uphill. And during times of crisis, everything worthwhile is uphill. It's just a higher hill to climb. But we still can climb it. You see, we are not given an overcoming life. We are giving life to overcome. There's a world of difference. I'm not entitled to winning. I'm not entitled to have an overcoming life, but I am entitled to having a life of which I can choose to be an overcomer. You see, there's a wrong perspective, and the wrong perspective is that life should be easy. I'm telling you, my name is John, I'm your friend. Life's not easy. It's all uphill. Always has been, always will be. The problem is we have uphill hopes, we have downhill habits. And downhill isn't going to get us where we want to get. So, I could give you all kind of examples. People hear me speak. I'm talking to you now. And people say, John, you're a terrific communicator. Well, I wasn't always a terrific communicator. I felt terrible. I remember how bad I felt. And I said, David, how can I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. And what was so beautiful is he looked at me and he smiled and he said, I know that you didn't do this intentionally. And you're totally forgiven and we'll never talk about it again. And I remember how I just felt a whole weight come off of me. And that drew me even closer in my friendship to him.
Sure.
Because he was so kind to me and he was so ready to say you're forgiven. And so when I say everybody needs forgiveness to forgive everybody, I need forgiveness. There are times, I mean, and what a fool I am to think, even at 75, that I'm not going to have to go back to, maybe it's to Margaret, my wife. I mean, hello. But, and look at somebody and say, you know what? I was wrong there. I missed that.
Right.
Would you forgive me? And the moment I taught that, certainly today, you could feel in the room, everybody in that room either needed to forgive somebody they hadn't forgiven, or they needed somebody to give them forgiveness.
Right.
It's just, I forget the writer. He was so famous. But he wrote at the capital city. Ernest Hemingway.
Yeah.
And he tells about Paco, who his son and the father had a bad relationship, and the son went home, and they lived in Madrid, and the father couldn't handle the fact that, that he and his son were strained in the relationship, and so he put in the newspaper, Paco, meet me tomorrow at noon at the fountain at the square. All is forgiven. Love, Dad. And the next day, when he went to the square, there were 700 Pacos that showed up.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, isn't that the way it is? We either need to be on the I'm forgiving you side, or I need to be forgiven.
That was actually one of the powerful moments, too, in Jamie's story, as she talks about one of the
Yes.
business executives that she pitched to that she had great respect for. She had actually thought she had closed the deal. She was right up to the moment. And they said, we love your product, but the answer is no.
Yep.
And she said, can you tell me why? And he goes, well, if you really want to know the truth, I mean, you're asking for it, but if you want to know the truth is, you don't have the right body figure.
Yep.
And you don't look the part to be a beauty executive or the owner of a cosmetic company. I don't think the clientele is going to receive from somebody who looks like you. And I was expecting her to have a little bit more different side of this story, how, she had to work through bitterness and anger and forgive over. And I think what makes her such a remarkable leader was she immediately did not let that land in her heart.
Yeah, that's right.
She talked about she had that knowing on the inside of what she was called to do, and we even talked about it at lunch afterwards, how she has this ability to not let it land. I think one of the problems with a lot of the leaders today, John, and the reason why they don't lead so well is they're letting too many things land.
I do too.
And it's a louder voice than the knower on the inside. So they've allowed the outside voice, even voices they've never met before, define who they are, help them think who they are, and they're not letting the thing they know by their own creator define who they are. So they're letting this other voice, this outside voice, dominate that calling, that surety that is in their spirit. And I've said this in our Q&A session, that if I could wave the magic wand and give leaders one quality, it would be that security, that certainty of their lane, their assignment, their calling. I call it my portion. I know my portion. I don't covet anybody else's portion. So when somebody criticizes me, that's fine with me. I know what I'm here to do.
And it's all about, I happen to have a copy here, Change Your World, how anyone, anywhere can make a difference. And can you tell us a little bit about, do you really believe that someone listening right now, wherever they are in the middle of a difficult time, do you really believe they can make a difference in the world?
I not only really believe that you can make a difference and change your world, I really believe you better make a difference. Here's the first. I think that to change your world, you have to have anger of the way things are, but hope that things can get better. And anger without hope puts you into desperate straits. Hope without anger is too Pollyanna, and hope without anger, you won't pay a price. There's a price to change your world you have to pay, and if you don't have a little bit of anger, you're not going to be sincere enough about paying that price. So in Change Your World, first, the whole premise is very simple. Quit waiting for someone else to change your world. And I wanted to start with a book that would allow people to have hope and say, okay, I can do something about where I am. And I think that's where we start. Mm-hmm. So the book is based on values. In fact, here's the thesis. If people learn good values and they live those good values, and if they value others and work together to develop a value-based community, they can change their world.
So good. So
And that's
good.
what we do.
Well, a lot of people ask, hey, what's a great book I can read next? How can I grow my leadership? So I'll just say to whoever's asking, Change Your World. And also
Thank you.
the John Maxwell Leadership Podcast is a must listen for people. John, thank you for your contribution.
I can't let you go yet because I got to tell you,
We're not done.
I listen to your podcast all the time, and I text you. I tell you the things that you're every time I listen to your podcast, I learn something. I have never listened, and I know I do leadership. I got it. But every time I hear you talk about leadership, there's something that you give me, and I get to take away. I mean, I've got a whole Craig Groeschel leadership file that's going to get in my book someday, of which I'll give you credit but no royalties, but I'll give you all the credit in the world. But the point of it is, you're a terrific leader.
Thank you.
And I listen to your leadership podcast because I always learn from you. So thank you for how you're helping me, making a difference in my life.
Well, I'm humbled that you listen.
Yeah.
Thank you. Lightning round, just for fun.
I learned.
Just for fun. Besides Change Your World, what's your favorite John Maxwell book?
Today Matters.
Today Matters.
Yeah.
Biggest leadership pet peeve, what makes you crazy?
Leaders not valuing people.
Favorite thing that you drink during the day? I just put that during the day for some reason. I
My
don't know why.
excess drink, it probably 2 of them in the morning by 10:30 that just keeps me caffeined up.
There you go. Yeah, I've got something similar.
I didn't know we were going to talk about my sins today. But anyway.
Last new thing you've tried?
Well, I did try just on basically flat surface. I just came back from Jackson Hole. And I never did I skied, but I never snowboarded. And so I just thought I would just try, and not really snowboard, but just get in it and just feel how that board was. And I got in it and I felt flat on my butt. And I got out of it. And it was the last thing I tried, and I wasn't any good at it.
But at least you tried.
At least I tried. At least I wasn't on a hill where I could really hurt myself.
There you go.
Yeah.
Favorite movie?
Oh, Braveheart. Oh, I don't know. Lincoln. I loved the movie 3 years ago on Lincoln that came off of Doris Kearns Goodwin's book. Braveheart, Lincoln. In fact, my favorite movies, I break them down and do leadership lessons off of it.
Excellent. Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. At 51, 22 years ago, I had a heart attack. And in that heart attack was literally at a Christmas Eve party with our companies. When I was battling for my life for a couple of hours there, it was pretty tough. You know you're not in good shape when they bring you in and you have one doctor and about an hour and a half later you got 5 doctors in the room. And it wasn't going very well. I needed to have a heart cath. I was in the wrong hospital. It's a long story. I don't want to go into it. But here's what you got to catch. Here's what I don't want you to miss. Don't miss this. Okay? In this incredible crisis of my life and death crisis that I had, when I came out of it and I came through of it, it made me such a better man. You say, okay, John, what happened? What was that turn in your life? The turn was very simple. I felt that my life was spared because my calling was important. And all of a sudden, it raised the stature of that calling, and it raised the stature of what I was doing. The calling got bigger, and I determined to get better. And I can say in the last 22 years of my life, they've been the best 22 years of my life. In fact, I would say the last year of my life has been the best year of my life. I'm 73, and I'm still going up. But it was that crisis. It was the fact that I came out of that and said to myself, I'm here for a purpose. I'm here for a reason. The calling is bigger. I've got to get better. Now, I give you those personal stories because you identify with the crisis. And I just want to wrap this time up today by saying, first of all, thank you, thank you, thank you. Again, you've taken personal time and you've said, okay, John, I'm going to learn how to take adversity and bring it to an advantage in my life. And remember, tomorrow, I've got 8 more perspectives to teach you. Don't miss it. Get your friends. Get on there with me. But I close this by saying very simply, it's impossible to know where you are and what you're going through. But it is possible for me to give you teaching of hope, teaching of practicality, something that you can put your hands on that will make you better. And that's my only goal. The only reason I'm spending time with you is because I believe in you. I believe in your potential. I believe in who you are. I believe, being a person of faith, that you are here with a divine purpose. And this crisis would be awesome if every one of us could just find our divine purpose. You have one. Trust me, it's there. There's always an answer. So I'm going to encourage you, even between now and tomorrow's lesson, I'm just going to encourage you to spend some time. Ask yourself, what's my purpose? Begin to look from the perspective that has a positivity to it and believe that there is going to be an answer for you.
If you're like me, you watch a video like that from Maxwell Leadership and you just get inspired. I love how it's so practical. It just makes a lot of sense. But here's the challenge. We have to commit to each other. We have to commit to change, both in our personal lives and also our professional lives. Looking for more information about the Maxwell Leadership Certified Team? Follow the link below to learn more. We can't wait to hear from you and add value to your lives.